Dr. Torkil, an author, a cinematographer, photographer.
That alcohol is the worst stressor of all. And if you have had a poor night's sleep, you can tolerate less of any kind of stress. So everything is intertwined here, so it's all connected. To be calm, even if the circumstances are stressful.
Welcome to The Other Side of Medicine, a trusted source for education, not medication, for 35 years. In every episode of The Other Side of Medicine, we deliver health information your doctor won't tell you about. My guests are the nation's leading health experts in science-based natural medicine, physicians, authors, researchers, and clinicians. We believe natural medicine should be first, drugs and surgery last, and so we promise to deliver you the next generation of health information built on three principles: common sense, science, and cooperation with nature. And today we are honored to have a special guest with us. It's Dr. Torkil. He is an author. He's a cinematographer. He's also a photographer, and he has worked as all around the world with helping people. And I guess he was also a medic in 1996 in the war-torn Angola. He was the first Norwegian medic to be able to work with them. And so he's got quite an experience as a general practitioner, as emergency medical doctor, and a very interesting perspective. He's an author of several books. Today we're going to be talking about one of his books, which is the Pulse Cure, which I think you'll find quite interesting. And we're going to get into how to be able to extend your life 24 years in just a little over 50 minutes. So stick around. So Dr. Torkil, welcome to The Other Side of Medicine, my friend.
Thank you, Dr. Christosek. Yeah, it's
Dr. J.
right side of medicine.
Call me Dr. J. It's a lot easier.
Dr. J. All right.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your family experience. You have some children, I understand. Like how old are they? And just give me a little bit of personal background for you. You might hear about that.
Yeah, I'm a 55-year-old doctor. I've been working in 25 years as a normal general practitioner and emergency physician, as you said. I got a wife, two kids, 17 and 19 years old. My son currently is traveling in Africa. So it's interesting for him. He hasn't been there before. And we've been kind of a traveling family. So a lot of the reasons why I've been working as a freelance doctor all of my career, because we have been traveling. So, and my aim of becoming a doctor was to live this kind of free life, to work, in some periods and then go off traveling, seeing the world, and discovering the world. So that has been my way of working, and also taking my family out into the world. We have been sailing for like 3 or 4 years, getting halfway around the world until COVID hit and we had to sell the boat. So I have a different angle into medicine than most doctors.
Okay. So you're also a film producer, I understand. Tell a little bit about that.
I've been making some documentaries, both on photography, but also on pilgrimages. So I made three films for the Norwegian television about doing pilgrimages to Santiago de Compostela in Spain, and also there's a one month trek in Norway pilgrimage that I've been making films about, and that has been very popular because pilgrimage has had a kind of a renaissance period now. Then people will walk and have started walking for the long time to see the health benefits, but also kind of maybe spiritual benefits of it. So I've been interested in that.
What kind of pilgrimages to where? I mean, what are these sites for?
Santiago, they are medieval pilgrimage sites. So in medieval times, people, Catholics, were walking to Santiago de Compostela. That's the most famous one in western Spain, northwestern Spain.
Very nice, very nice.
And also in Norway, there's been a medieval pilgrimage route that we also did again, and and inspired people to take up walking for long walks.
Oh,
To
that's nice. Where
yeah.
could people see those documentaries
On
online?
that was before online. It was on Norwegian national TV. So
Oh, okay.
so they were seen, by probably 20% of the population. So it was
Very nice. Very nice.
yeah,
Okay, well, good.
yeah.
Well, let's dive into your book, the Pulse Cure, because I really think that it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Because even though I am a physician and I've been practicing functional medicines, as I mentioned to you earlier, since 1986, I'm still, when it comes to listening to our body, I'm more intuitive. I don't really have not really delved into having, a watch that has the ability to monitor various body functions. So I'm more old school in trying to listen to the body and how it speaks to you, and just in the body language that occurs, where if your heart starts to race because you're a little stressed out or you feel a irregular heartbeat, you kind of pay attention to your body, and then you take care of it accordingly. But your perspective is using technology, and so I want to talk a little bit about that and some of the ups and downs of that, and some of your perspectives on that. But most Americans and most people, I think not only Americans but around the world, wait till they get sick, and then they go running to find out what their vitals are and those types of things. This perspective you have is to listen to your body by using this technology and understanding what you can do about it before it becomes a problem. So I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, so what we can see in the wearables, in the smartwatches, the rings, and all the different devices that we can use now these days, they're tracking the heart rate variability, which is a metric that will show the state of the autonomic nervous system. That, of course, is maybe the most important system in our bodies, and it's also the system that, for so many people now, is overloaded. Too much stress, too little capacity, too many things that we eat we're not supposed to eat, alcohol, and so many things that affects our stress levels. And we have a hard time listening to our body because throughout evolutionary history, there was never any need for that sense. We were fighting when we had to, or fleeing from enemies or animals and so on, and we had to hunt for food and forage and so on. And when we did not do that, we were relaxing, sleeping at night. It was dark, nothing to do. So this, our stress levels was sustainable for most of the time. So we didn't really have to need this sense into our own system. And in fact, if we could feel the noise that our body was making, in the production of all the energy and everything that goes on, it would disturb the senses from the outward threats. But now, these days, it's our own stress levels, it's our inner stress levels that is threatening our health, creating low-grade inflammation and manifesting as disease, in all the body's organs, including the brain. So, and of course, as we don't have this, it's probably possible, to be very active in listening to the body, but for most people it's hard, and every demand on our body will be shown in the heart rate. So even smaller demands that would pass under your radar normally, and like me and so many other people have discovered that once you start tracking your heart rate, you discover a lot of stressors that are kind of below what you can feel. And particularly as we get used to that, we think that this is the level of our function. And we find out that when you're able to use these monitors as kind of a speedometers for our physiological intensity, we're more able to regulate our stress levels. And we suddenly find that, okay, you're sleeping better, you're eating better, you're in better shape. Oh, okay, so this is what it feels to be refreshed, Okay, you understand it was another level of well-being than what you thought.
What are the three main points in your book the pulse cure, what would be the three main things that you try to convey to people?
Yeah, the things that you will see when you start tracking is, one is that alcohol is the worst stressor of all. Even if, as me and many other people thought, it was kind of something to wind yourself down in the evening, to relax. A lot of people drink to relax, but you can see that, okay, alcohol throughout the night is a huge stressor. You can also see, most people will find that a late night meal will disturb the sleep and give stress levels also into the night. Other things they will find is that breath work is very effective to calm yourself down. Cold plunges, cold water immersion and cold exposure and so on is very effective to do that. Many of the watches and devices will show you the VO2 max. That is a number, a biometric for the level of your fitness level. And most people will find it, if the fitness level is low, then just small strains will stress their systems. Daily life will be harder. Yeah.
You have mentioned alcohol as being a stressor. It's really interesting because there's some good research to show that for example, the people in the blue zones, one of the things that they do in small quantities is they have a glass of wine, and they find that to be one of the factors that helps them to have the healthy and long life. So you're saying that even in small quantities, it raises heart rate?
Yeah. And people are really shocked by to see how just one glass of wine or two glasses of wine will affect their stress levels throughout the night and their well-being the day after. And according to Whoop, one of the producers of a bracelet that tracks your heart rate and that gathers information from the users, say that alcohol is by far the worst stressor, and that there's kind of a linear load on your system, unit by unit. And that there is no unit that they find that will not stress your system. But what, of course, in the blue zones and other places, because when I was in medical school, and maybe 10 years after that, we were advised to have 2 glasses of wine for men and 1 glass of wine for women every day, as for health reasons. But what we didn't know then was also that loneliness is so dangerous, that loneliness will make you sick, not only for mental reasons, that was probably known, that you could be depressed or anxious or so on by being lonely, but that you could also get cancer and heart disease and the whole spectrum of physical or physiological diseases was not known. So that probably that was the confounding factor that we didn't think about. So it wasn't the alcohol in itself, but it was that in the social circumstances where alcohol was used, it was also social and also protecting them from loneliness, and that was the most important thing. So now at least research shows that there's no amount of alcohol that in itself is healthy. So of course you got the polyphenols that could be healthy, but maybe you could get that from tea or berries and other sources as well. I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had mentioned the loneliness factor in the blue zones. That's one of the areas of benefits, that they have a tight community of people that stay together their whole lives, and so they're never lonely because they have this really tight knit community. So I think maybe the alcohol that they consume, maybe the little bit of stress that puts on their body, is counteracted by having these other factors in their life, the community, so there's no loneliness, and they're exercising every day and getting out in fresh air and getting all the herbs in their diet. All those things will kind
and
of
sunshine.
Yeah, and sunshine benefiting them, right? So maybe that's So
maybe
yeah.
because you can also see that if you have a robust physiology and your level at your intestines, you don't have a leaky gut, you don't have inflammation in your system, you can tolerate probably alcohol better than if you have a system that is already on its knees, and then you add alcohol, So certainly you can see that if you have had a poor night's sleep, you can tolerate less of any kind of stress. So everything is intertwined here. So it's all connected. So food, sleep, exercise, everything is into a big, how to say, it's all affecting each other, all these factors.
Speaking of
Maybe it's what you have
sleep,
seen as well.
speaking of sleep, how dramatic of an effect does that have on our body's rhythms, on the heart rhythm and the other rhythms inside of the body?
Yeah, that has a lot to say. And of course, as a doctor, I've been working so many night shifts. And I remember particularly in the periods with the lots of night shifts, my heart rhythms was more erratic. I remember taking an ECG and I didn't have AFib, but it was a lot of extra beats, and then unsystematic, problematic rhythms. So poor sleep, night shifts, poor sleep consistency, that you sleep in different hours in the weekend, you have kind of social jet lag and so on. Then and you need to sleep long enough. You need to sleep 7 to 8 hours, and a lot of people get less than 6 hours, and that's really dangerous also for cancer and heart disease and all of these other diseases. And we didn't know, even as a doctor, I knew that being sleepy and working night shifts was uncomfortable, but that it was downright dangerous and carcinogenic. We didn't know that at the time. So now we know so much more about this, thanks to, you as a functional doctor, and so many others have been paving the way to see that, okay, nutrition, sleep, exercise, being outside in nature, all of this will prevent us from getting sick, because both in the US and in Norway, the whole Western world, of course, we're doing the mistake of waiting until you get sick and then do something. But that's often too late. There'll be a process going on for many years before that, that we luckily can use these wearables, because the heart rate variability can tell you about your risks from getting these diseases. If you have the system under stress, with a poorly functioning immune system, your heart rate variability will be low. And once you get to manage this better and can improve your heart rate variability, then you're more robust. Your immune system is working better and can take care of, the cancer cells that starts, coming up, every day on a daily basis,
So
and also microbes and all that.
you're saying that there is a correlation, there's a connection between your heart rate and your immune system. Is that what I hear you
That's right.
saying?
That's right. That's
I've
right.
never heard that. I've never heard that talked about before.
Yeah, it's I also quote the immunologist Jenna Makioki in the book, and she's also saying that heart rate variability is a proxy for the state of your immune system. So, and you can also Google, for example, cancer, heart disease, dementia, Parkinson, autoimmune diseases. You can endometriosis, infertility. You can Google almost any condition you can think of, and then connect it with heart rate variability, and you will see that there are research on the field, because this is a biometric that is easy to obtain, from ECG or wearables and so on. So there's tons of research on heart rate variability connected to all these different diseases, and heart rate variability is connected to 9 out of the 10 deadliest diseases in the US, and then of course the rest of the Western world. And whether it's causal or a consequence, well, it seems to be on both sides of that. So
That's
a
really
low heart,
interesting. That's really
yeah,
interesting. You mentioned we're talking about sleep and getting proper rest. During sleep, our body goes into a repair mode. Could you talk about autophagy for a minute and how that's so important for repair and building the body up?
yeah. So autophagy is a process where your body starts eating or recycling the poorest functioning cells. The poorest functioning cells will be under stress, and it will release different cytokines showing that they're in distress. So they're kind of biological markers showing which cells will be in a poor state. And when you don't eat and you are fasting for a certain amount of time, or exercising, I must say that too, then your body starts recycling those cells and using the material that they can use into building new cells. So it's kind of a cleanup of the worst cells, the senescent cells or zombie cells that some would call it. And it will, improve your whole function, your whole cells, and reduce the inflammation in your body. And the good thing about the heart rate monitors is that they will show that. So the first time I was fasting, I was skipping breakfast, I was expecting to see stress on my system because it felt uncomfortable. And my experience until then was that if you feel uncomfortable, that is stress. But this was not that kind of stress. It felt uncomfortable, but for the nervous system, it was calming. So I could clearly see that it was easier to get into the parasympathetic mode when I was fasting than when I was eating, and that was a surprise that you could see that food stresses.
Just for our listening audience benefit, when you say parasympathetic mode, we're talking about the state of the body where it relaxes and it calms things down and slows everything down.
Yeah, and that mode, when you see it on the heart rate, because in that mode, the relaxed mode, when we breathe in, the heart rate speeds up a little bit to take advantage of the extra oxygen in the lungs. And when we breathe out, the heart rate goes down a little bit to save some energy while there's less oxygen in the lungs. It measured in milliseconds, but it's palpable. You could feel it when you're very calm. But if you are stressed in the stress mode, regardless of its mental stress or physical stress or physiological stress, your heart rate will beat at a very steady rate. And that is what these wearables will detect. And they will give you the answer, in real time. Now I can check my stress levels is 33 on a scale from 0 to 100 on the Garmin watch. So I'm relaxed. If I had been eating certain foods, like for an hour ago, it could be quite high because of the food. And that was a big surprise to me that food could be stressful. Who would have known, and your heart rate goes up. If I eat 2 large slices of cake, to my surprise, I could see my stress levels really go through the roof. Even though I was doing the same work before and after 2 big slices of cake, for example. If I eat something with chili in it, like I did here the other day, they put chili in everything without giving a notice. I can't sleep. I'm awake until 2 o'clock at night, having a hard time sleeping because my heart is pounding, and the stress level is high. So
interesting. Years ago, there was a book that was written on food allergies and taking pulse and seeing the increase in
Dr.
pulse rate.
Coca.
Yeah.
Dr. Coca. Yeah.
Talk about that for a minute. Talk about that for a minute.
I was on a podcast and one person said exactly like you did now, that there was a guy, and this was in the 50s. This is one of the guys that coined the term atopy for like eczema and allergies and so on. It was kind of one of the first pioneers in that area, and he would find out that when you were eating the foods that you couldn't tolerate, your heart rate would go up, and that this was a way to detect whether you could tolerate the food or not. And he was kind of discarded, that this was not, that he didn't have the scientific evidence for it, other than that the heart rate went up. But we can clearly see that when you use this, that the heart rate will go up. And I usually say to people that if there's a huge difference between the level of stress when you're fasting compared to when you're eating, and you cannot easily find out, a lot of people react to gluten, milk, there are some, usual suspects. But if you can't, even if you take those out of your nutrition and there's still stress, okay, then you should take a test for food intolerances. And so many people find out that they have it. And once they start eating and cutting that out of their diet, then their heart rate becomes more stable. So so it's clearly having an effect, and it's one of the most common things that I hear is the surprise of people that they find how stressful the food is. And of course, most people will react to ultra processed foods, and particularly the kind of foods that are addictive, that is produced by engineers to make you addicted to this mix of carbs and fat and salt and what have you, to
Sugar.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So it was really interesting. Before I mentioned the next thing in my mind, the Dr. Coco's book, he was a pioneer, and that's often the case with pioneers, that the established community, the medical community, will poo-poo it. And there's so many examples of that in history, of medical history. It's really astonishing how people react to new information in a negative fashion, because it goes against the grain of what they are using at the time. So, we have to applaud people who are pioneers like that. But in any event, we had mentioned just a few minutes ago about deep breathing. Deep breathing is such a powerful tool to help to calm down the body and get into the parasympathetic mode. And what have been your experience with heart rates and deep breathing and those type of measures to help to reduce stress?
Yeah. So breath work would be a great way to be able to downshift your stress levels, and a bit depending on what is the stressor, because if it's mental stress, or you're just hectic, it's just busy, and then you can use breath work to calm down. But say if I've been eating chili or a lot of bread or a lot of bakery goods, I can breathe as slow as I can, but it would not help. So it depends on what the stressor is.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I think that should be really carefully considered by a lot of people who think they can just deep breathe their way through everything. That's a very, very good point.
Yeah. So it's like swimming against the stream if you try to do that, and it's a physiological way like that. So, but other than that, for mental stress and like daily stress, then it's really good, and also to be able to be calm even if the circumstances are stressful. Particularly for me working at the ER, that if there's kind of a dangerous situation or a critical situation, that I can remain calm, and then I can use my breath to do that. Or in conversations, I can often on podcasts like this, when you start talking, I start to breathe slowly, and so on. If I, particularly if I need to, if I'm stressed and so on. So or in other conversations. So after a while, you get used to using your breath as a gas or brake pedal. You start using it almost automatically in your daily life, and before, of course, I had no clue, breathing was something you just did. And I remember I also described it in the book. I remember the nurses at the ER went to a course learning to breathe. I was just laughing, why do you need to learn to breathe? Are you joking with me? So but of course I understand after a while that the breath is kind of the lever into the autonomic nervous system, a way to be able to control it.
It's a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a more powerful tool is cold. So cold exposure, that would be able to mitigate even chili stress, or even this kind of physiological stress. So it kind of is very effective. So if you go into the cold shower or a cold plunge, that can shift your system into the parasympathetic mode for a long, long time.
Interesting. I do that every morning, by the way. In my shower, I take cold showers. So I wasn't aware that even if somebody was eating unhealthy foods, that it would shift them into the parasympathetic mode. That's a really nice tool to be able to have, as far as using it to your advantage. If in some circumstances happen that you can't eat as healthy as you'd like, which oftentimes is an excuse. I always tell people, don't rely on Band-Aids to try to cover up for your poor eating habits. So
yeah, I wouldn't know. It will downshift you into the parasympathetic mode, but whether it would stop the damage that you could do to your intestinal system, I'm not sure. But maybe it will when you have a leaky gut and you eat food that you're not supposed to eat, and these unwanted molecules come into your bloodstream, it will create cytokines and interleukins that will create an inflammation.
Sure.
And the cold will reduce this inflammation. But whether it will help on the root cause, for that inflammation, I don't know. But it will
Sure. Well,
certainly
just for our
take down the
listeners,
symptoms.
just for our benefit of our listening audience, we just threw out that term leaky gut. It's a term that basically defines the state of the gut. The lining of the gut only has one cell layer thick. And so that one cell layer oftentimes gets damaged because the mucosal lining on the gut, the mucus layer of the gut, gets eroded. And then it could, things like poor diet, alcohol, stress, other things, other variables, medications could then damage that one cell layer. And then what happens is the gut becomes too permeable, too leaky. And then that allows particles of undigested foods to leak into the bloodstream, some toxins from microorganisms and other toxic elements, that could actually get into the bloodstream and cause havoc and cause actually many kinds of diseases. It's been documented, well documented.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very precisely. Yeah. It is the root cause of so many diseases. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it will at least dampen the symptoms from it. Just like if you have a hangover also. If you have been drinking too much alcohol, you feel really bad, your stress level is high, you can go into the cold and reduce the symptoms. Of course, it will not take out, the acetaldehyde that is the problem, but it will reduce the inflammation molecules that gives you the symptoms. So
now you're from Norway. You're from Norway. So do people, I know that I've heard this in the past, maybe it's just a myth, but do people in Norway, take cold plunges as on a routine basis? And do they roll out in the snow and that kind of stuff?
Cold plunges has become very, very fashionable, almost to say. It's so many people going into saunas and winter swimming and using that for as a activity during the winter.
Yeah, but people in Norway, I thought that they were doing that before it's become fashionable today.
Yeah, they have been doing it all the time, but now it's almost everybody does it. It's very common. Most people I meet have done that. So as opposed to maybe 10 years ago, only the aficionados or really interested people would do that. But now it's a commonplace. Most people will have done it or do it on an irregular basis. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the difference between and the benefits that happen to, let's say, males or females, young or old, when the heart rate changes. What kind of things happen between those age groups and those in the sexes?
I think the difference between men and women when it comes to heart rate variability doesn't seem to be so different. Maybe the women have a bit lower heart rate variability, but it's not significant, I think. It's more from the
conditions that they will develop or manifest, or for example, women could develop, problems with menopause symptoms too early, or they could have, premenstrual syndrome because of stress, all those things. That's what I was referring to.
Absolutely. And so many women will have too much stress, which will lead to PMS symptoms. So PMS is not unavoidable. It's related to stress. So, and we can see that on the wearables. So you can see that in the week before menstruation, you can see that the heart rate variability goes really down for a huge dip. And it's visible as a dip that is larger than COVID. So because from my Instagram and from everybody contacting me, because this book has been a huge bestseller in Norway for like 2 years, translated into 8 languages now. also. But so many people contact me showing me, okay, this is how it looks, show me screenshots from what they find. I can clearly see that women with PMS have such a low dip that is comparable to COVID or even worse. And if you have PMDD, kind of the even worse PMS, then it can be 10 or 12 days with a really low heart rate variability. And once, so it's, for these women, it's like having COVID, once every month. But the good thing is that when they're able to predict that week and they can sleep better, make sure that they eat better, maybe they do a yoga session or a breath work instead of the high intensity training that they were planning, then they can mitigate the stress and flatten this curve almost completely, and also relieving the symptoms of PMS to the point of almost having none of it. So that's very, very important for women. And so many other reproductive problems has also relation to heart rate variability. You have endometriosis, you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you also have infertility. So your fertility improves with improved heart rate variability. And also a tendency for spontaneous abortions will also have a relationship to heart rate variability. So the better your heart rate variability as a measure of a better immune system will reduce all these problems from the reproductive organs.
Yeah, and that what's really interesting is that everything we're talking about here today, we have significant control over with regards to our heart rate. We've talked about how, our deep breathing can make a difference in helping to lower the heart rate and get into the parasympathetic mode. We're talking about foods. We're talking about attitudes. All these variables are things that we have control over. Isn't that right?
That's right. And they're free. Not the least. So they're controllable, they're free, they're available to everybody. And
yeah. Now, what about males now? When you have stress in the difference in the heart rate with males, what kind of conditions do we see with males?
You would also have prostate problems, erectile dysfunction, and many of these male problems will also be related to heart rate variability. But I would say that there's less, stress is more problematic in women than men. So I see, as a doctor, I see much more women having stress-related symptoms and diseases than men, like autoimmune diseases and fibromyalgia and those kind of things.
What do you think the reason for that is?
I am not sure, but I would think that some of it is because of this problems in the reproductive hormones and those systems, and women have a bit different immune defense, regulated a bit different than men. So that is probably evolutionary from ancient times that they have this difference.
Okay, so we're talking about all the benefits of having, Well, by the way, before we talk about the next question here, what type of apparatus or thing to monitor heart rate do you recommend?
Yeah, I can easily recommend the Garmin watches as the best tool, both for their how they work, but also for the pricing, and that there's a range reaching probably from, I'm not sure exactly the prices. I have no affiliations with Garmin, but I would think that from $150 for the cheapest one and all up to probably 10 times that amount for the most advanced watches for the athletes and so on. So, and you would probably for like $300 get a good enough, really good quality watch. So the Garmin watches have this system where I can check my stress level. Now I'm in rest, so now the stress level is 17. So very calm. That's good. So you can get the speed, like you have the speed as you speak in real time, but also it has a body battery system. That's an estimate of your powers. How much have you charged during the night? How much do you spend during the day?
Mm-hmm.
And these numbers are not developed by Garmin, but by a Finnish company named Firstbeat that has more than 20 years of experience with physiological measurements. And of course, they use your data, and compared to millions of others, and use artificial intelligence and use this information along with your breath, along with your temperature, along with your movement, and will give you an estimate of how you function. And of course, you should not just listen to what the watch say, but you also compare it how you feel and what goes on in your life. But so I think this artificial intelligence, and then coupled with our human intelligence, is kind of a power pack of knowledge. And most people find out that they get to know their and sense their own being better with the watches. So many people think that, okay, we should be able just to listen to ourselves, but most people will find out that they get better at listening to themselves when they have this. For example, I can much more easily feel after eating bakery goods or bread and so on that, okay, I feel like I have the flu a little bit, and then I can check with the watch. Okay, yeah, I can see that my stress levels went higher, and most people feel like, yeah, they're getting to know their body better with these
Mm-hmm.
instruments.
Yeah, what about the downsides of having to wear these monitors, and just the fact that some people would become worry warts, I guess is the way I would put it.
Hmm. Yeah, somebody may be that, but most people seem to easily find that this is controllable. Just like in your car, that you would want to have some degree of the control of the speed and how much gas is left on the tank and so on. And most people quite easily, maybe after an initial some weeks, because it's new to us all. We'll just take it in as some of the numbers that you get in every day, like how much do you pay in the stores, and it becomes kind of a natural thing. But of course, probably there's a certain percentage of people getting more stressed about it, um, and for some people, as stress is such a huge reason for disease and symptoms, many people will find out that they are stressed, that they have a lot of stress, maybe day and night, uh, as a reality check for how their state is. And they may be even more stressed by that when they see the reality. But of course, putting away the watch will not cure their symptoms. They will be just as stressed. So um, then it's maybe very important to be able to get down your stress levels into a manageable or sustainable level.
Yeah, speaking of stress, I thought it was quite interesting. I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and then you had mentioned that when you get into the emergency room, you actually de-stress. Talk about that
Yeah.
for me. That's what I found quite
Yeah,
intriguing.
that's quite funny, and many people find that too, because most people would equalize work with stress, just by habit, just that you would think that work is stress. But so many people find that, oh, when I'm at work, I'm in the parasympathetic mode. I do my work. I know it. They probably maybe be doing it for 20 years, and then find out that, okay, this is not a problem. I can do more work. That is not my stress source. The stress source may even be when you're on a holiday and you're in a hot place. You're eating food that you're not supposed to eat late into the night, having extra wine and so on. And so suddenly you find out that your source of stress is different than what you thought. And our brain is kind of a predicting machine, so what you would expect is often what you feel, just because you expect it. So for me, it was quite a surprise to see that if I really wanted to relax, I could go to work, and I can work for a week. That is that. If I go next week, I will go into the north of the Arctic Circle in Norway and work for a week, where I'll be on call 24/7. Then I know that is like going to a spa for me. I know I'll be calm the whole week.
Mhm.
So
Well, I think maybe it's because you love your work. That probably has a lot to do with it.
yeah, I love my work. I feel safe. I feel that this is something I'm in a flow state. I don't have to think so much about, I don't have the patients are coming. I'm trying to fix the problems, and there's not so much other things I have to consider than just doing that, you know.
Sure, sure.
Uh, so yeah, that's a peaceful time for me. Opposite of what I thought.
Yeah. Well, let's talk right now. Let's shift. Let's shift a little bit. Although this is going to still kind of coincide what we're talking about. Let's talk about the uh, the 8 different ways that we can add 24 years to our life. Talk about that. That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, that is a big American study on 700,000 American veterans from the Army or military service. And they have followed them for, I don't remember, 12 or 16 years or somewhere around that. And they would identify 8 areas of lifestyle strategies that would give people, if they followed them from they were 40 years old, would give them 24 years of extra life compared to if you did do those lifestyles wrong. So, and those, that would be physical exercise, it would be sleep quality, it would be that you don't drink much alcohol, that you don't smoke, that you have a stress management, good stress management, that you had a good diet, that you do not smoke, and that you do not use opioids.
Hmm.
And of course, these are the also the main things probably in your work, but also in my book. So except for the opioid, that is probably an American crisis, but I can also see in Norway that the patients with the poorest prognosis will be on some kind of Oxycontin-like painkiller. And
Sure.
if you do these lifestyles right, then you will live 24 years longer than if you did all of these wrong. If you had poor sleep, poor relationships was also one of them, good relationships.
Yeah,
So if you
again,
have
once
poor
again, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, so if you have poor relations and drink too much alcohol, poor sleep, poor stress management, poor diet, smoke, and so on, if you did do these things wrong, okay, then you also in my clinical experience, you would be lucky to pass 70 years old.
Mhm.
If you do all of these things right, you have a good chance of passing 90 years old with your head and mind still intact
Yeah,
and working. So that
that's
is also my clinical experience.
yeah. That segues just like perfectly into what the blue zone concept is. That the people in the blue zones have all those elements within, except probably the smoking, because some of the people in the blue zones they'll smoke, and they seem to override the negative effect of that. But all the other constructs that are within those 8 principles, those are blue zone principles. And the
Yeah,
people in the blue zones, as you know, they have the highest level of centenarians of anybody in the world.
yeah,
So we need to really take really good note of the fact that if we are more proactive in our health care, we take more of a charge rather than waiting for something to happen and run to the doctor, that we
yeah.
are going to be able to live, as I tell people, independently healthy. And that's what I think what the whole thrust of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we want to, because now, in the US and Norway, the system is we wait till people get sick and then we start treating them because it's more money into that.
Mhm.
So there's too much money in sick people, and that's unfortunate. And the problem with all these strategies that I mentioned that give you 24 extra years is that they're free. There's no
Mhm.
commercial pressure. Nobody is going to pay for any advertisement for fresh air, for moving around.
Mhm.
And the good thing about these wearables and this technology is that there is money and commercial interest in giving you a device that can help you stay healthy. So that is, optimistic to me, that there's money on the front side and not only on the back side of disease.
So I'd like to know what you think is probably one of the most important things we could do to alleviate stress in our life.
That would be make sure that you sleep enough, use breath work to calm yourself down, make sure that you have enough downtime, that you can see on your wearable that your balance is good enough. Because if you're in the on mode, the executive mode, productive mode all the time, we're not constructed for that. We have to have downtime. We have to be calm for parts of the day. Otherwise, you will crash. There will be symptoms, and there will be a price to pay for that. And I'm just currently writing a book, just finishing my next book, the Rest Cure, about the power of rest. And having enough rest in your life also make you more productive, more creative. It's not just useless downtime, that you just have to tolerate. It's actually the mode in where you're more creative, where your subconscious is working better. And you could do that by reading, by listening to music, by any of these things that would give you the downtime that can compensate for your stress. So stress is not the problem. Stress is not the problem. It's not that we are not supposed to stress. So we are not. The problem is not that we are overstressed, but that we are under recovered. So that is the problem. So once we start to be better at recovery, we can tolerate this stress, and that this will give us more flexibility in our function. So we should not be rigid, at one level of intensity. We should be able to push ourselves to the maximum, but also to take ourselves down to like zero, so to have this control ourselves and not just dependent on external circumstances.
Yeah, that's really exemplified in the blue zones once again, because a lot of the centenarians that are there, when they've been interviewed, they've had very difficult lives. They've had a lot of emotional and physical traumas around them and their families and their friends and their communities, but yet they were able to overcome those obstacles, those stressors, by all those other variables that they're really doing right. So it's really important to understand that, we can really make a big difference on the choices that we make every day. Speaking of which, I want to mention and see what your thoughts on this too, is deep breathing is a powerful tool, but visualization, I find that is also a very powerful tool to incorporate along with deep breathing, to visualize, because we can go into our minds in a state to take us wherever we want to go, and we can just see whatever we want to see in our mind's eye, and that can bring comfort to us. So what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree on that we can use visualization to take us to a calm place. Absolutely. That is one of the strategies in the Pulse Cure. No, in my next book, The Rest Cure, where I have small, maybe you do it for a minute, just to take yourself back to a calm, peaceful time in your childhood or wherever you were, and then your body will respond physiologically as if you were there. So this is how and exactly the opposite, of course. I remember before I used to do speeches and TV shows, I was just the thought of me being, the next day on live TV was my heart rate would just explode just by the thought of it. So our thoughts is so powerful, our visualizations, in both ways. If you visualize catastrophe, we will be stressed. If you visualize peace and calm, we will be calm. And to be able to take control of that and not just be affected by whatever happens, to us, that's important.
It's always better to go to your happy place, just, in
Yeah,
your mind eye. Mhm.
yeah,
So
that's
good.
right.
So, okay, this has been really a very intriguing conversation, and people can get your book online, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a standard published book, so it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and whatever you would buy a
Great.
book. It's also an Audible audiobook and an ebook, so you could have it on your Kindle. So yeah, and it's still amazingly the only book on how to connect the wearables and heart rate variability to lifestyle strategies. And that is hard for me to believe, that is like
Well,
that. But it's
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So so hopefully
You're
it will help so
you're
many
a
people
pioneer.
get control.
You're definitely a pioneer.
Yes, yes, yeah, and everybody that uses it, now is we're kind of the first people into a new continent, and then discovering things. I get on my Instagram, I get reports from people discovering all kinds of things, that once you let people, out on the continent, they will discover a lot of the things that you wouldn't necessarily be doing yourself, but so it's very interesting to be a part of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to have you come back when your new book comes out. So keep us posted on that. And when the
Yeah.
rest cure comes out, we'll definitely get you to come back and tell us about that exciting book. So, Dr.
Mm.
Torkil, this has been very intriguing. It's been very privileged to have you on our program, and continue your work. And it's just wonderful to see that there are doctors who are really pioneers like yourself, who are taking, the lead in helping us to be able to
Mm.
live a long life and become independently healthy. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and very nice that it comes from a pioneer like you. Thank you so much.
Okay, my friend.